On the 1st of every month, the bank clock flipped to 9:02 a.m., and our balance dipped same amount. Same memo, family. I stood at the counter in my winter coat, breath fogging the glass, while a new clerk's screen blinked a name I'd never heard. She swallowed it back like a secret, but the letters followed me home. By afternoon I brewed coffee to lift questions, lined receipts across the table, and ironed my hands flat until they remembered steadiness. The memo had changed help, then support, then family, as if words could dress a habit for church. After dark, the porch side, and an envelope slid under the door. Come alone, handwritten, no return address, the kind of ink that hopes you're tired. I set it beneath the bread tin beside my penciled creed. No decisions after dark, hand. Let the house choose silence over theater. The radiator clicked its approval. The clock refused to hurry me. Past mistakes knocked. I didn't answer. The first of the month had been a sermon about loyalty. Tonight, it asked for secrecy too. I folded receipt, touched the crease like a prayer, and whispered to the room, if this is love, it can stand in daylight. Asterisk, asterisk, sweetheart, pull your chair close. Tonight we're talking about money, promises, and the word family written where it doesn't belong. I'll pour coffee. You bring patience. We'll keep it plain, an American fair dealing. Receipts, mercy, with a backbone. If stories like this steady you, tap subscribe and stay for Sunday at dusk. If you believe families deserve truth in full sentences, press like so this porch light reaches another home. I'm not asking for applause. I'm asking for company, because courage eats better with someone at the table. You'll hear how a rule no decisions after dark kept me from signing between errands and turned a habit into honesty. You'll hear how daylight turned pressure into witnesses and money into something we could live with, not fear. Before you judge him or her, you need to know what the first of the month has meant in this house. Stay with me until the end. Asterisk, asterisk, the first of the month begins at the kitchen table, the way a hymn begins with breath. I tilt the lamp a finger's width and let the wood wear gold. Ledger on the left, coffee thermos on the right, paper check stubs, breathing in a rubber band beside the bread tin. I open the window a thumb to let in honest air, then close it when the street starts making opinions. 2 envelopes lie where the light is kindest built, and family, as if paper could tell me what love ought to do. I square them to the table's edge and listen to the room remember me. The radio reads, school closings. We don't need a forecast I can see for myself, clouds with a bright seam. I check the math I checked last night, and then I check it again because tiredness can add gossip to numbers. My rule lives in my ribs like a well-set nail. No pressure after dark. Read everything twice. That rule has paid more bills than some jobs I could name. The memo on the transfer used to say help, then it learned to say support, and lately it favors family. Like a coat that thinks a new button makes it Sunday best. The amount never changes. Needs do, amounts should. That stubborn number blinks in my head like a little red engine that only knows one track. By 8:15. I've stacked the bills that earn their stamps and addressed them neat as hymnal rows. The family envelope gets a paperclip, not a stamp. Paperclips are for things that still owe me a story. I write today's date in the ledger as if dates were stitches that could hold a cloth together. Coffee fogs the glass and leaves a thumbprint I could read if I were a different kind of woman. I'm the kind who trusts receipts more than fog. At 8:35 my coat remembers the path to my sleeves. I tuck the ledger, the stubs, and one folded question into my bag. The bus pulls up as if it understands attendance. City morning hums bread vans, shoe leather, a man arguing kindly with the gate. I ride 2 stops, get off with the same faces that know the first of the month by heart, and climb the bank steps with knees that still file reports. The lobby smells like lemon and patience. The clock over the teller line clears its throat at 8:45. Take my place where I always take it and let routine set its hand on my shoulder. 8:58, the clerk I've known forever switches with a new one whose name tag keeps climbing north. Names do that when they're looking for courage. I slide the wire form forward, filled out but not surrendered, and rest my fingers on the edge of the counter the way a person rests on a railing. 9:02 is the button's favorite moment. I watch the screen because I've learned to read faces made of light. The memo field sits like a small stage. Help flickers, then support, then family. Something else stirs. A cursor swims over a recipient profile, and the first letter of a name rises like a fish and dives away. The clerk swallows and smiles, a smile that asks me not to have seen. I have seen enough to be patient. which is not the same as quiet. The wire leaves with the soft sound I feel in my wrist. I collect the receipt. Write the date again in a corner, habit's little stamp of dignitand. Step aside for the next person's story. On the way home, I lean my forehead against glass that used to be a phone booth and listen to the city. Finish a sentence I didn't start. Repetition can be a lullaby or a warning. It depends on who writes the memo. Back at the table, I open the ledger and slide the 2 envelopes into the light again. Bills waits like a teacher who knows your middle name. Family watches like a dog watching a suitcase. I put family back in the drawer and close it so gently the handle thinks it was my idea. Habit wanted both stacks to travel. Boundary wanted only one. Daylight sides with boundary. I log the transfer without flattery and add a small note in the margin. Same amount, new word. My patience hums along with the refrigerator. Outside, the month begins. Inside, my rule nods once. That rule saved me once. And next. The transfer asked me to break it. I was brought up where cornfields draw their own horizons and church basements teach you how to set up chairs without being asked. On Mondays, the union hall counted hours out loud. On Sundays, the choir counted blessings in 4 parts. My mother carried a sentence the way some women carry a purse. Good fences make good neighbors. She meant it kindly. Know your edge. Mend it when it splinters. Wave from it with both hands. I learned fairness, like the alphabet. Straight lines, clean corners, names spelled right. After school, I wiped chrome at the hardware counter until I could see myself telling the truth in it. Men paid cash and kept their receipts folded square in the breast pocket. Women bought paint that promised summer on the can and asked for 2 extra stirrers because one always breaks. The owner said, "No tab after dark," and even the light bulbs seemed to approve. Across the street, the station's brass clock clicked like a metronome for hope. Timetables taught me that promises travel in columns. Arrivals and departures are only honest if someone writes down the time. He came in from the machine shop with oil on his knuckles and quiet in his eyes. He fixed the bell on the door without telling the door it owed him thanks. When he said my name, it sounded like a handshake. He kept a rubber band around his receipts and listened to the end of a sentence before answering it. We walked the platform on warm nights and learned to let trains speak without giving them our plans. He said, "If I'm late, I'll call," and then he did. Small vows are the only ones that grow. We learned money the way farmers learn weather, by watching it cross a distance. Count in daylight. Write the purpose on the envelope. Don't lend what you need to sleep. Help is a beautiful word, but it should come with witnesses. When a cousin needed a bridge, we laid planks with dates, stamped on them, and checked the weight twice. Nobody fell in the river because paper remembered. We took cheap rides to the city when the plant went quiet. Resumes folded like church bulletins. Sandwiches in wax paper. New York taught pace. Home taught decency. In the terminal, I learned to stand to the right on the escalator and to move when moving was called for. At supper, I learned to pass things with both hands and to say thank you like it belonged to the food and the person. He kissed my forehead the way a period kisses a sentence. Neat and final. The kitchen table became an altar with drawers. We blessed food on top and stored invoices below. Mama's fence line turned into my door frame. We could open the door to anybody, but we didn't take the hinges off to make them feel welcome. When help came, it walked through daylight and left footprints you could count. If the station master said the 907 was running late, he didn't pat your head. He tapped the board, and you could see for yourself. That's what I wanted for our life, love with a bulletin board. We promised to meet at supper, always. We learned each other's faces in the shadow the lamp made just before it turned the room to gold. For a long time, it was enough. Then the month started, arriving at the bank before my stew could gather itself. And a table, patient as saints, learned to wait for a platform announcement. We married between pay periods. Rings modest as washers, vows spoken like instructions we meant to follow. Our first apartment was a walk-up that creaked kindly when we came home. The kitchen wore paint the color of warm bread. Pay stubs curled on the counter. Metrocards nested in a bowl by the door. The table had 2 jobs, altar and desk. We blessed food there and added numbers that didn't love us back. The baby arrived like weather, loud and necessary. We measured growth on the doorframe and patience in teaspoons. Asterisk, asterisk. Life found its rhythm. Boots by the mat, keys on a hook, calendar squares penciled with hope. We saved for tires and called it victory when they were merely round. He tucked receipts under the salt. I logged them in pencil because pencil forgives. We were not rich, but we did not lie to each other about money. That is a kind of wealth that keeps. Then a hairline crack. Just this once transfer for a cousin's bridge. A late arrival, dressed in hustle. A call that didn't come because service was bad. The story of a need arriving the same way each month, punctual as tides. Once became sometimes practiced until it could be called routine. The memo learned new words like a child trying on hats: help, support, family. The amount did not change, even when the reasons did. The stew glossed over while the clock cleared its throat. Half-dash truths rehearsed themselves. I didn't want to worry you. It wasn't worth a conversation. I kept my voice soft so our child would learn gentleness, and my spine straight so we would not forget arithmetic. Mercy is a quilt. It covers once. Math is a ledger. It notices patterns. I watched the first of a month grow a spine of its own. One I had not voted for. One night I left his bowl in the oven and found the warmth had turned into waiting. Another night I ate alone and realized I had chosen health over ceremony. I wrote the rule that would keep me whole and taped it to the inside of my ribs. No midnight decisions. No secret debts. No disrespect where we bless food. If news can't stand the light, it can wait. I practiced it the way you practice stairs. After a fall, slow, steady, hand on the rail. The city kept moving. We did too, but with a pace we could live with. He learned to call from platforms. I learned the difference between rest and hiding. We pointed to the table when talk got noisy and let the wood settle us. We were not tragic. We were learning math. The first wire taught me mercy. The second taught me math. The new clerk's name tag kept sliding north as if courage were a collarbone. She clicked through the wire form and the screen, through a brief reflection of my face, then a profile I wasn't meant to see. A first name rose like a fish breaking water, bright, wet, undeniable, and then it dove. Not a cousin, not a sister. A stranger with a familiar claim, family. Her smile asked me not to notice. I noticed, and in noticing, I did not raise my voice. Please print the receipt, I said. The way you ask rain to do its work without thunder. She printed. I dated the corner as if dates could carry weight. Outside, the flag stuttered in a winter gust, and buses announced themselves like tired prophets. By afternoon, my inbox practiced manners it didn't own, confirming tomorrow's family transfers, amount, standing authorization on file. Standing authorization. I read the words twice and felt the chair grow a spine beneath me. Then the voicemail from a number with a polished voice. No need to come in again, ma'am. We can keep this running for efficiency. Efficiency is how some people name your absence. I brewed coffee and spread the ledger, like a small geography I still controlled. The memo had dressed itself over the months. Help, support, family. The amount never changed. The reasons tried on hats. I set the receipt on the table, and the room fell quiet, the way rooms do when a child admits something true. After dark, a soft sweep against the door. An envelope slid under like a nervous animal. Handwritten, no return address. Come alone, I'll explain everything. I stared until the ink stopped performing. The bread tin sat where it always sits, patient as a practice. I lifted the lid and slid the envelope underneath, beside the penciled creed that has kept this house standing. Daylight decides. The radiator ticked its slow metronome for courage. I washed the cup I'd already washed. I opened the drawer and touched the family envelope without lifting it. I wrote the date in the ledger again, each digit a stitch against unraveling. My heartbeat moved from my throat back into my chest, where it belongs when wisdom leads. The phone lit with a new message. The preview arranged to be polite. We can finalize tonight if you're ready. Ready, as if money were a coat, as if love were a switch. I turned the phone face down and let the dark be as dark as it needed to be, without borrowing me. I stood at the window and let the street practice being a street. No one special, no one sinister, just people, carrying their own math. I whispered my rule so the walls could hear it and remember when they're tempted. No decisions after dark. If something is true, it will be truer at 9. If something is decent, it will not require me to stand barefoot in my doorway and choose between dignity and deadline. I set out a single plate, then put it back, the gesture my hand makes when my heart wants theater and my spine wants peace. I let the kettle sing, and did not mistake the sound for urgency. The house rested its weight on the promise we wrote together years ago. The message wanted my name tonight on their terms. News travels like steam in a small family. First hiss, then fog, then water on the floor. By breakfast, a cousin had forwarded a thread that spelled my name with advice it hadn't earned. Be reasonable, it's just family. She knows what she's doing, don't make a scene. I brewed coffee and set out to envelope bills, and family then slid family back into the drawer. Slow enough to hear my own reasoning click into place. The bank called with generosity that fit in a script. We can simplify this by automating the transfer. Saves you trips. Same amount, same memo. We'll mark it as standing family support. Standing support. I imagined a chair that never got to sit. No automation without documentation, I said, and no changes at night. The voice brightened the way fluorescent bulbs do when they've decided to be helpful, whether you like it or not. We can email you a link. Daylight, I replied. Paper witnesses. The pause on the line grew a sweater. Wrote to the manager in words that have paid rent for years. Please schedule a daylight review. Kindly prepare the full paper trail authorizations, memos, recipient profile, and all changes. I copied the clerk whose pen tells the truth. I CC'd the pastor who prays with his eyes open and the friend who brings cookies in silence. Then I turned the phone face down and turned my face toward the work at hand. Eggs, toast, and a sink that knows more about constancy than most policies. By noon, a relative rang the bell with a pie and a mission. It's only money, she said, the way people say it's only weather while standing in a flood. We've all helped one another. Yes, I said, in daylight. Her smile tightened. Don't embarrass us with a fuss. I wiped my hands on a towel and remembered the address of my backbone. A paper trail isn't a fuss, it's memory with ink. She tried a softer angle. You used to be more flexible. I used to be more tired, I said. There's a difference. She set the pie down too hard, and Mercy rose to keep it from breaking. We stood in the kitchen where our grandmother taught us to measure flour and truth the same way Lavelle. When she left, the house sighed back into itself. I set 2 envelopes on the table again, habit, love, symmetry on. Then, I chose. Bills went into the bag with the ledger and a pencil. Family returned to the drawer with a paperclip. Not as punishment, as a promise. We'll talk when talking can see. I walked to the bank to hand-deliver my request, because some sentences deserve to travel upright. At the counter, I asked for copies of anything with my name on it. That might take time, the clerk warned. Daylight is generous, I said, and meant it. At home, I straightened the chairs and reheated soup. The thread I'd been forwarded kept buzzing like a trapped fly. I opened a window, and it found its way out. I set 2 envelopes on the table, then put one back. This kitchen would not be a courtroom. Mara called from a corner where city noise makes its own weather. If you loved him, she said, you'd just send it. Love appears in court a lot. I prefer it as a witness, not a lawyer. I do love him, I said, plate in one hand, towel in the other, and that's why I won't feed secrets between supper and sleep. Don't be dramatic, she tried, which is what people say when details are about to cost them convenience. I set the plate down and set my jaw gentler than the past. Drama is noise without receipts. I've got receipts. She exhaled a city sigh. It's just money. I looked at the family memo in the ledger and saw how the word had dressed itself to sneak in after dark. Money is a messenger, I said. I wanted to speak plain. Memory shuffled its cards and showed me every late-night loan I had made with a heart that liked to hurry, the bridge that turned into a highway, the favor that learned to live on my porch, the month I sold sleep to buy someone else's silence. I remembered how I thinned myself to keep peace and learned that people will misplace you faster if you make it easy. I rinsed the bowl and did not rinse the past. A text arrived from a number that hid under a stone. It's not what you think. Please tonight. Tilde of urgency. Period of secrecy. The screen glowed like a stage. I turned it face down like a book you intend to finish. When you can see the page. Mara softened. I'm trying to help. So am I said. Help is a porch light, not a trapdoor. The kettle put its shoulder into a small song. Come by tomorrow, I added. Bring cookies. Bring your good eyes. We'll sit with the paper and decide together like people who mean it. She let a laugh out that sounded like a coin finding its way to the right jar. You're stubborn, careful, I said, and we both knew the difference. I laid the receipt on the table and folded it once, then again, the way you fold a letter you'll carry for a long time. The house had settled into that honest silence that arrives when nobody is performing. Outside, a car door thudded, low and urgent. Tires whispered against curb. Footsteps paused at my gate, the way caution does when it finally reads the sign. I looked at the door. I looked at the bread tin with its creed. I looked at the lamp shaping the room into a place you could tell the truth without shouting. I stood up in the slow way that tells a body it's not being drafted, it's being invited. I folded the receipt once, then heard a car door outside. He came in with urgency, wearing his coat, no hello, no hat off, just deadlines poured into a body. He held out withdrawal slips and a pen, like hospital forms at a bedside. There are fees if we miss the window, he said, as if fees were weather and I were the cloud. The pen clicked in his hand with a rhythm that tried to teach my name a new dance. Water, I offered, because kindness is not surrender. He ignored the glass. It's 5 minutes, he pressed. Sign here, I'll run it down. He laid the slips on my table, on my wood, where we bless food and retire arguments. Paper gets to visit here only if it knows our rules. Daylight, I said. Witnesses, copies, corrected notes. He smiled the way boys smile when they think they've already won. You can be there, he offered. Magnanimous with my own time. We just need to keep it moving. There's moving, I said, and there's pushing. I turned the slips so the lamp could read them. The memo line glared family in a hand that had learned to write fast. Whose family? I asked. Soft. He shifted. Ours, he said. The way people say ours when they mean mine. Gossip crept in through his second sentence. Names, needs, consequences. A story told at speed so my patience wouldn't catch up. Everyone's watching, he warned. They'll say you made us lose it. I reached for the porch light instead of the pen. Click. Warm honesty rolled across the floor. And under the chair legs he reached for the ledger, fingers fast, like a pocket trick. My hand landed on the cover with a steadiness I owe my mother, and a lifetime of small exactness. This book travels in daylight, I said. If you want the numbers, you can hold a copy with your own name on it tomorrow. It's just a technicality. He tried. It's a boundary, I answered. And a boundary is a promise you keep to yourself in public. He leaned in, voice lowered to the pitch where fear likes to bargain. Look, we can avoid the apology and the notice if we're quick. He dangled privacy like jewelry. Repair doesn't hide, I said. It learns to stand still and be seen. Silence found us. He looked around my kitchen clock lamp, bread tin, the chair I keep for Tomorrowland, somewhere between the lamp and the tin. He realized I wasn't moving. He pulled his hand back from the ledger and let the pen fall idle. We'll pay fees, he muttered, trying to leave me holding a bag made of shame. We'll pay fairness, I said, and sleep in our own names. I slid the slips back to him and pointed to the door with my eyes, which is the kindest way to point. He buttoned his coat too fast and missed the button. I did not offer to fix it. He hesitated at the threshold, turned once to throw the last small stone. People won't like this. People can like it in daylight, I said. They'll have better light to see by. He reached for the ledger. I reached for the switch light chose for us. Morning found me where I had promised to be, at the table with a list that could carry weight. The phone performed its circus 48 hours. Lost claim, dishonor, visas, if nouns could herd me like sheep. Group chats, churn screenshots, concern, someone's dramatic sighs spelled out like scripture. The bank reminder pinged with the cheerfulness of a machine that never has to eat with the people at invoices. I didn't answer any of it. I wrote my own verbs: delay, request, assemble, witness, correct, route cleanly, apologize, publish. I printed the list and taped it inside the ledger, a doorframe for the day. Then I washed the cup. Ordinary is the outlaw tool no one expects. Another call. If we process today, we can avoid penalties. If we process wrong, I said, we invite worse. She tried unhurt. We're trying to help. Help that hides in evening wears someone else's coat. Daylight, I repeated. Glass room, bring paper. The church bulletin email arrived, innocent as ever, asking for casserole sign-ups. I put my name on macaroni and my heart back in its chair. The doorbell rehearsed insistence and gave up. The house and I kept pace with ourselves, re-emptied trash, refilled sugar, resaw the simple things that make a person less available to panic. By noon, I had confirmation. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., conference room east. The manager's reply included the words, full documentation attached hand, an attachment big enough to be a confession. I printed it and stacked the pages until they agreed with each other. I called the clerk. I called the pastor. I texted Mara, cookies invited. The phone exhaled its drama and became the tool it was built to be. The group chat, relentless, sent one more volley. It's cruel to wait. Cruelty knows how to borrow grammar. I thought of every night I had fed secrets between supper and sleep and woken up with my own name hungry. Waiting can be cruel when you wield it like a weapon. Waiting can be kind when you hand it to morning and ask it to be a mirror. At dusk, I turned the porch light on, not as a signal but as a ceremony. I wrote 3 lines on an index card to keep me steady when rooms try to lean. Be the calmest person in the room. Write it down. Read it aloud. I tucked the card beside the ledger. I set 1 plate for myself and blessed what didn't require a committee soup. Bread, a square of chocolate because stubborn days like sweet ends. I washed the bowl and left it on the towel to dry evidence that stopping does not equal surrender. The house breathed with me. The kettle rested. The phone slept face down like a well-trained dog. They will tell a story about me, I thought. Let it be one I can sit beside. Let it be one that remembers I chose daylight because I love us. Because I'm staying. Because names deserve edges that fit. If I wait, they'll call me cruel. If I don't, I'll call myself something worse. Conference room east wore glass instead of secrets. Morning leaned on the windows like an honest witness. The pastor took the chair to my left, hat on his knee. Eyes opened the way he prays when paper starts acting like a person. The clerk set down her tote, uncapped a pen, and arranged copies in a way that told the room she'd already measured it. The manager arrived with a stack that looked like it had slept poorly. Full documentation, he said, softer than yesterday. We read aloud because words stand straighter when they have to walk around a room. Teller logs, authorization forms, the memo history I knew by heart. Then the page with the recipient profile. Not a sister, not an aunt guardian, a woman entrusted with a child tied to an old obligation I was never properly shown. The note trail wove through an arrangement dated to a bad winter, a medical debt, a promise made in a hallway where fatigue is fluent. Inferred consent, the clause said, as if quiet were a signature. The clerk underlined, slow and neat. This language waives oversight, she said, tapping a paragraph that smiled while it stole. And here appeal forfeited with continuation. The pastor hummed a sound I've only heard when someone tries to put God's name on hurry. I felt heat rise in my chest, not anger, clarity. My stubborn rule: no decisions after dark looked like a seatbelt in this light. We kept reading. Automated transfers proposed by a desk no one could locate. Renewal dates that slid past midnight like foxes. The family memo, chosen to make the ledger feel like a living room. And the kicker, a rider that routed questions to a department with a voicemail box that eats afternoons. I took my pencil and began to write the plan that would let care move without turning tomorrow into collateral. First, I said, assumed gives documented. If money moves, we put real names on real lines. Second, appeal restored. This child's needs aren't a door we nail shut. Third, remove inferred consent. Silence will no longer impersonate me. Fourth, clean routing to paths 1. Transparent account for the child's care with quarterly statements. 1 optional family aid fund that requires 2 signatures and receipts. 5th, daylight meetings for review. 6th, written apology for the rush disguised as kindness, and public notice to retire the rumor that secrecy is love. The manager leaned forward. The attorney, late, damp with explanation, arrived in time to hear himself disagree. This is excessive, he said. The clerk slid him a copy with the underlines. This is repair, she answered, and the pastor nodded like a gavel. We tested the plan like carpenters test joints. No wobble. We read it out loud again, because clean language is a kind of light. I initialed the margin of the lines I would not surrender. The clerk stamped the draft date time. Room like a lighthouse on paper. I looked through the glass at the cold, bright street and felt something unhook in my ribs. All the nights I'd been told we'll fix it later. All the doors were later turns to never. All the times help arrived wearing somebody else's name. I set my palm on the folder and it felt like a table level. The attorney tried one last shortcut. A smile sharpened to a point. If we hurry this afternoon, we can skip notice. I capped my pen. We can also skip that sentence, I said. The manager inhaled, straightened, and surprised himself. She's right. Morning put a hand on my shoulder. My voice came out even. What you called urgency was a shortcut around my dignity. Proof doesn't gather itself. I walked the city like a woman sewing a quilt from shirts the winter tried to keep. At the branch, the head teller printed the teller logs timestamps with ink sturdy enough to lean a case on. At the kiosk, I pulled ATM receipts that showed where my card breathed while someone's email insisted I was nodding yes in another zip code. The clerk forwarded internal memos that never learned my address. I stapled them to the authorization that dared to speak for me. I traced the email threads from their first polite just confirming to the slick, standing authorization that pretended to be a thank you note. I circled the hour where the subject line changed. Close. Help gives support gives family. Language has fingerprints. I pressed powder on every one. Calendar invites appeared like ghosts, added after the fact to make midnight look like a staff meeting. I printed those too. Then wrote no attendance in the margins, like a teacher who loves you enough to grade honestly, in my wallet sleeve. Thin as memory, I found his pencil line, the one my late spouse wrote after a bad year. Slow is not refusal. Slow is repair. I copied it on the first page of the folder, where my hand would pass every time I reached for proof. The ink steadied like a pulse. Each ally cost courage. The manager risked a frown from upstairs to fetch an audit trail. The clerk put her name on a cover sheet that would live a long time. The pastor agreed to sit, silent and present, with a pen he uses mostly for weddings. Mara brought cookies and, more important, quiet eyes that could read a paragraph without trying to forgive it. Each ask spent a relationship chip. A cousin said I was making noise. I wrote receipts in my notebook and underlined it twice. Noise is what details sound like to people who benefited from your blur. Another relative sent me a budget breakdown colored in with guilt. I sent back the plan with 2 signatures highlighted and the word daylight written 3 times like a hymn. The sky brightened. The work refused to be impressed. I numbered everything like I was building stairs. Exhibit A through H. Then I, for integrity, the humane alternative typed clean, headings plumb, verbs that don't slouch. I packed a spare pen, water, throat lozenges, and the small square of chocolate that reminds a backbone. It's invited to stay. The phone performed urgency in costume. We could resolve this with 1 signature. Resolve is a good word when it closes a wound. It's a liar when it closes a mouth. I pressed delete and then print. Choreography that feels like prayer. On days like these. At night, I laid the folder on the table and ran a cloth over the cover. Not to shine it, just to tell it we were ready. 1 signature could end this. Or end me. Pressure arrived, suited and casual, like salesmen who memorized your dog's name. Family ultimatum first. Sign now. Keep it quiet. Don't make a show of what we've always done. I poured coffee and answered with my 3-plank porch. Rules, receipts, Grace. Rules to keep the boards from sagging. Receipts so memory can be shared. Grace so the door still opens when someone learns how to knock. Then came the lowball settlement. Numbers arranged like a hotel bed. Neat, inviting, built to be undone. We'll call it even, they offered, which is what people say when the math would embarrass them. Even is not a feeling. Even is a ledger that can stand in public. Rumor threads bloomed like dandelions fast, bright, useless for soup. Group chats rehearsed myths about cold hearts and closed fists. I set my phone face down and took my folder to the diner that keeps the coffee hot and the windows honest. Chrome edges, lemon pie, a waitress who knows how to look at paper without judging it. Corner booth. I stacked my order like a carpenter lays out tools, rules, receipts, Grace. Highlighter, sticky flags, a ruler for margins. I read every line aloud under my breath, sanding splinters with a pencil eraser. The saxophone on the radio tried to sell me nostalgia. I tipped my hat to it and kept building tomorrow. Mara slid into the booth with cookies and a face that had retired the word stubborn. You're careful, she said. Careful is how bridges stand, I answered, and we both looked at the plan like it was lumber that had finally stopped warping. Across the room, a cousin posted a fresh paragraph of pity disguised as guidance. I sharpened my pencil. Pity is a blanket. Guidance is a coat one drapes, one fits. I chose the coat that lets you move. When the pie arrived, the waitress leaned close. You want me to run off anyone who comes in loud? No, I said, smiling. Let them order. We'll let the truth be audible. She topped off my cup like a benediction. I wrote one more index card and slid it behind the agenda. Glass room. Blinds up. Speak slow. Don't bother your name. I tucked the card where my fingers could find it without my eyes. Evening would bring its theater. I had morning reserved with a key. If some of them wouldn't sit at a table set with Grace, I knew where to take my hunger. If they won't sit with Grace, I'll sit with God. 3 in the morning is when the house tells the truth. The refrigerator hums like a tired choir. The street forgets it's a street and becomes a long thought no one is finishing. I sit at the kitchen table with the lamp tilted a finger's width and let the room wear its honesty. The radiator ticks like courage counting itself. I wrap both hands around a mug I don't drink, because warmth is a language I still understand. I lay the folder open as if I'm setting out bread. On top, I place a blank page that won't lie to me. The pen I choose is blunt, no flourish, no drama, because tonight isn't for pretty. It's for plain. I write the headline I wish someone had handed me years ago, terms that keep me whole. Under it, in block letters, daylight meeting, neutral room, witnesses with pens, corrected agreement, written apology, public acknowledgement, clean routing. The radiator keeps time. My pulse follows. I say each line out loud and listen for wobble. Daylight meeting, because shadows are too good at persuasion. Neutral room, because kitchens, blessed food, not contracts. Witnesses with pens, because memory needs friends. Corrected agreement, because help should not carry a trap. Written apology, because repair that hides is only rehearsal. Public acknowledgement, because rumor is a hungry animal and facts are the food. Clean routing, because money should travel like a good road. Direct, lit, with signs. I add smaller planks beneath the big ones, braces under the deck, copies carried out by every signer, blinds up, names spelled right, appeal preserved. Review quarterly. I draw a box around daylight and shade it in with patience until the word looks like a window. When my hand begins to tremble, I press my palm against the page until it stills. It takes exactly 3 breaths. The nurse's count I learned the night grief. Tried to run the lights. Old erasures. Come to stand in the doorway like children who want a glass of water. The late night loans I called love. The favors I called peace. The mornings I woke with my name thinner than my sleep. I nod to them the way you nod to people who no longer get your evenings. They linger, then leave, because the lamp is honest and I'm not bargaining anymore. I open the bread tin. Inside, the penciled creed, daylight decides. The clipped notice from the paper, where a different fight learned manners. An index card that reads, be the calmest person in the room. I place the card beside the pen. Calm isn't my personality, it's my practice. I call the front desk to ask if the copier will be working at 10. The night clerk clears his throat and says yes, as if I've asked for a miracle he can actually provide. I thank him with my whole voice. I set my watch for morning, not to push it closer, just to tell it I'll be ready. I write a small prayer on the corner of the page. Let my voice be kind and unsurrendered. Let my no be clean. Let my yes be earned. I tuck that corner under the folder's lip where only my hand will find it. I place a square of chocolate on the windowsill to remind myself that sweetness belongs to patience, not pressure. When the radiator rests, the silence that remains is not empty. It's decided. I stack the pages, close the folder, and slide it to the center like a loaf cooling on the rack. Outside, the dark loosens. Inside, the rule in my ribs stretches and sits down. I wash one bowl and leave it to dry. I set one place at the table and let the chair across from me be a promise, not a vacancy. At dawn, I set one bowl. It was enough. Morning opens like a well-made door, hinges silent. Swing true. I lace my shoes and feel the day fit my feet. The list I wrote at 3 stands up when I stand up, which is how I know it's worth my breath. First call, the bank. Good morning, I say, and mean it. Conference room east, blinds up. We will proceed on the corrected draft only. Copies for all parties. Please have routing forms printed and unsigned. The manager's voice arrives in human instead of corporate. 10 o'clock, he says, we'll be ready. Second call. The attorney, remove inferred consent. Replace assumed with documented. Restore appeal in full. Add written apology and public notice to the agenda. He tries a shortcut out of habit. I hold the line out of practice. Noon, he says at last, like the word belongs to both of us. Third call, the pastor. I'll pray with my eyes open, he says, and bring a pen. Fourth, the clerk. Tabs, forms, stapler, she replies. Copier confirmed. I text Mara one word, and receive a photo of a box with a paper doily, and a heart that looks like it slept. I print one more clean copy of the humane alternative, and slide it into the folder's front sleeve. Behind my ID, I place the pencil line from my late spouse. Slow is not refusal. Slow is repair. I want my hand to touch it every time I reach for proof. The concourse receives me and does not dictate me. I let everyone else rush and count my steps instead. water fountain, information desk, a nod to the guard who lends dignity to the morning by showing up on time. At the bank, I request the seat that faces the window, because light behaves better when it knows it's invited. I check the blinds, they are up. I check the copyright purrs like a cat that's learned my name. I lay a pen by each chair, not as a courtesy, as a commitment. The manager enters with a folder that looks lighter than yesterday. The attorney arrives and chooses a chair that keeps him honest. The pastor sets his hat on the credenza like a blessing designed to be visible, but not loud. The clerk flips her notebook open to a fresh page that already knows the date. We review the agenda without hurry, because clarity is faster than speed. I breathe the nurse's count once more and feel my voice settle into its home. The room that tried to be a maze has agreed to be a table. They offer a line I've learned to duck. Today or never, someone says, testing the air. Today by my terms, I answer, placing the folder in the center, the way you place bread. Conference room east tried to look like a church, glass walls, bright light, a big table asking for reverence. I chose the chair where morning could touch the paper first. The pastor sat to my left with his hat quiet on the credenza. The clerk uncapped her pen like a small gavel. Mara placed the cookie box between us, the way nurses place flowers, not to hide the smell of disinfectant, but to remind you it's still a room for people. The manager entered with shoulders lower than yesterday. The attorney followed, legal pads tucked under his arm like birds that wouldn't fly. We began with the only instrument I trust, order. Timeline first, I said, and laid down the chalk line, the transfer history, the first of the month ritual, the email that said standing authorization, the voicemail that called secrecy efficiency, the handwritten come alone that slid under my door. The clerk matched my pages to theirs, nodding at each time stomp like a metronome. The pastor prayed by breathing. Now the omissions, I said, and slid the draft. I placed my finger on the sentence that taught silence to impersonate me. Here, assumed. Replace it with documented. Define how documentation happens. Real names on real lines, not previews on screens. The attorney exhaled. Theater. Industry standard. Human standard. I answered. The manager surprised himself with a quiet, documented is clean. Next, the locked door to tomorrow. Restore appeal, I said, tapping the clause that nailed it shut. A child's care is not a cul-de-sac. The clerk underlined appeal until the word looked like a gate. Agreed, the manager said, and the pen made a sound like a hinge set right. I drew a line through inferred consent. Silence does not get to sign, I said. Not in my house, not in this bank. The pastor's amen was a nod you could hang a coat on. The attorney tried a narrower trick. We can keep the language and promise restraint. Language is the restraint, I said. The clerk crossed it out, ink decisive. We came to money, which always tells its own story when you ask the right way. Clean routing, I said. 2 paths. 1. Transparent trust for the child's care quarterly statements. 2 signers, independent ledger. 1 optional family aid channel that only opens with cosign and receipts. No more fog-labeled family. The manager leaned over the page, eyes doing real arithmetic. She's right, he said. Water crept from melting snow on boots at the door, proof that pressure belongs outside when daylight's in the room. Last, I said, and rested my hand where apology belongs. Written apology for the rush, dressed as kindness, and a public notice, not to shame to repair memory. The attorney reached for pride and found paper instead. Publicity invites questions, he warned. Good, I said. That's how windows work. We ran the copier. It hummed like a hive that knew the queen was safe. The clerk stamped the draft date, time, room, then slid copies to each corner of the table. The manager signed first, the attorney next, the clerk and pastor as witnesses. I waited until all the names that moved money had earned the right to sit beside mine. Then, I printed my name the way you set a postplum. Before we adjourn, the manager said, "There's someone you asked to meet." He opened the glass door and a woman stepped in wearing a coat that had worked longer hours than she had. Lines on her face knew winter. Her hands held a folder and a photo sleeve. Not a rival, a guardian. "I'm the one," she said, voice careful. "For the boy. He's not mine on paper, but I'm the person who wakes when he coughs." She slid a picture across. A child missing 2 teeth and none of his hope. "I didn't know how to ask without breaking your house," she whispered. "They told me the word to use was family." I looked at the photo, at the folder, at the fear in her posture that wasn't asking to win, only to endure. I set my palm flat so the room would remember this was a table, not a counter. "We've built a better way," I said, and walked her through it. Trust with sunlight, reports you can hold, aid that needs 2 hands to carry it, quarterly reviews with chairs for all names involved, no midnight traps, no whispered debts. She exhaled like someone stepping off ice onto a good plank. I can live with that, she said, and then, quieter, he can, too. The attorney looked smaller. The manager looked human. The clerk wrote Guardian present in the margin like a blessing. We set a first review date. We set a copy schedule. We set the habit of telling the truth at noon. The attorney cleared his throat. One last test of who we were now. We can make this right publicly or quietly, he offered. Publicly, I answered. The notice ran in a narrow column between a fish fry and an amateur choir's spring concert. Correction issued. Agreement amended. Oversight restored. Apology recorded. No trumpet. Just a bridge anyone could cross. I clipped it with kitchen scissors that know how to treat paper like a guest, squared the edges, and tucked it into the bread tin beside Daylight Decides. Funds learned their lanes. The trust opened like a proper gate. Quarterly statements. 2 names. A ledger that didn't blush. The first deposit arrived with no perfume and plenty of clarity. I paid the overdue bill that had been standing on 1 foot, then the smaller one that hides behind big ones. I wrote for light on a check to the library. The librarian squeezed both my hands and promised new bulbs. Above the reading tables, so sight and sense could be neighbors. At home, repair moved into its own chores. The porch stair that had been shimmied into hope got a proper tread rise and run like they were taught in school. Mara brought red-tipped tulips and a grin that retired the words stubborn for good. We set them in a jar. The house inhaled. I tightened the wobbly chair. It thanked me by not squeaking during prayers. Some ties tugged themselves loose and floated away. I did not chase them. Twine has its season. A cousin texted without strategy. You did right. I invited her to soup and put the good bread in the oven. The neighbor who prefers chatter to tending waved from his windshield like a civilian. The manager nodded at the station, 2 fingers from the wheel. A salute to a lesson learned. At the first quarterly review, the Guardian arrived with a folder worn at the corners and a smile that hadn't practiced. The boy had drawn a train with a big window and 2 people inside waving. The clerk checked boxes. The pastor wrote witness like it was his middle name. And I sat in a chair that didn't try to sell me speed. We passed cookies around because a table is a table, whether it seats scripture or spreadsheets. The kitchen found its old weather. I sat 1 place most nights and 2 when company had been earned. The phone slept face down after supper and woke like mail, not a fire alarm. The memo line on the ledger returned to nouns that mind their business. When I logged the month, the margin note said clear instead of careful. That felt like spring. One afternoon, a letter came addressed in a hand that used to sprint and now tried to write kindly. Inside, not forms, a request. Could we talk at your table? There was a small square beside the word, yes, in daylight. I checked it with the same pen I use for blessings. I placed the letter on the counter and let the tulips share the vase with the day's mail. A letter arrived later this time, asking for a seat, not a signature. Come sit close, sweetheart. Let's fold the map while the kettle thinks. Here's what the road taught me. A boundary is a promise you keep to yourself in public. It is not a wall against love. It's a door. Doors let people in. Frames keep the house standing. Write your rule where your hands can touch it. No decisions after dark. Read it twice. Windows up. Witnesses seated. Copies carried out. When rooms lean, touch the wood. Grace doesn't mean pretending nothing went wrong. Grace is telling the truth without throwing the person. Grace fixes the board, then sets a chair for whoever comes back in daylight ready to use it. Mercy without structure is just melted sugar. It sweetens and then sticks. Mercy with a frame nourishes. Patience isn't passivity. It's the slow courage to gather receipts, to underline verbs, to insist on glass rooms and working copias. It can feel like smallness while you're doing it. Then you look up and realize the roof stayed on because you wouldn't sign in a storm. Love that asks you to vanish is convenience wearing your sweater. Real love meets you at noon, signs its own name, and helps rinse the cups after. If someone wants your signature more than they want your safety, teach them your doorframe. Asterisk. My kind of Americanness sounds like neighbors who show up, clerks who tap the math, managers who can learn the sentence she's right, and pastors who pray with their eyes open. It looks like corrections printed beside chili cook-offs, trusts that balance, and trains that run on time because rules held. It's not fancy. It's fair. Keep help in daylight. If aid is needed, root it. Cleanly transparent accounts, cosigns, receipts, attach witnesses, not because you distrust people but because you respect memory. Don't fear paper. It's just memory you can hold. Don't fear waiting. It allows morning to testify. When the night performs urgency, turn the phone face down and ask your rule to speak. If the thing is true, it will be truer at 9. If the thing is decent, it won't mind a room with windows. If you must stand alone, stand at your table. People who know you will recognize you there. Now tell me, in the comments, where did you learn to wait with courage? What sentence will you tuck into your wallet? Who sits beside you when you read the fine print? If this gave you steadier hands, subscribe and share it with the friend who keeps mistaking kindness for surrender. I'll be here next Sunday at dusk with another grandmother story, plain, American, and grateful to daylight. Bring your own brave rule, and I'll set 1 cup or 2 as wisdom requires. There's one more story this table could tell, if you'll sit with me next Sunday. By Sunday, the comments changed their weather. The first ones had teeth, these had hands. I spoke too soon, a neighbor wrote. Thank you for teaching pause. The church bulletin tucked my name between a chilly supper and him practiced persistence with gray small letters. Big relief. At the corner store, the cashier slid a note under my receipt. Proud of you. Mammon rang up the next customer like nothing holy had happened. Outside the bank, the manager lifted 2 fingers from his steering wheel. Quiet salute. Lesson learned. Online, the rumor thread cooled the way steam slips off a winter platform. Visible, then gone. A cousin posted. She waited, and daylight told the truth. And for once the hearts tapped softly instead of hard. The librarian stamped for light on a donation slip and promised brighter bulbs above the reading tables. Even the neighbor who prefers gossip to gardening asked about tulips. Not trouble. I clipped the public notice, squared its corners, and slid it into the bread tin beside Daylight Decides. I rested my palm on the lid so the house could feel my thanks. Word traveled farther than I set the table for. Evening forgave the day. I tilted the lamp a finger's width and let the room wear gold. I set 1 bowl and breathed. The second waited patient in the cupboard, available by choice, not demand. The window held its blue dusk. The porch light clicked on like a rule that knows its job. I rinsed a spoon, left it drying on a towel, and listened to the house keep its steady heartbeat. Radiator clocked, my name resting where it belongs. The phone slept face down until morning. If anybody needs my hurry, they can ask the light first. I opened the bread tin and touched the small archive. The apology on letterhead, the clipped correction, the index card that says, be the calmest person in the room. I put them back where patients can find them. Somewhere far off, a train blew a soft horn promise, not command. Steam rose from the kettle. I sat, sipped, and let gratitude choose the pace. The month will turn again, but the path is marked. No glass rooms, working copiers, chairs for every name. We made a habit out of daylight. Next week I'll tell you about the ledger note tucked in a postcard with no return address. If this steadied your hands, subscribe, like, and share it with someone who keeps mistaking kindness for surrender. I'm here every Sunday at dusk with another grandmother story, plain, American, grateful to daylight. Next time, a postcard with no return address, a ledger note folded small, and a lesson about the difference between warning and welcome light. Bring your chair, your patience, and your own brave rule. If this gave you courage, come back at dusk. Subscribe next story at dusk. Thank you. Be good to your neighbors. Porch lights on. Soft music holds fade.